Thank you for joining me today. This conversation is one that has been echoing in classrooms, boardrooms, and even around family tables. Why are so many intelligent people, scientists, writers, thinkers, and professionals, walking away from religion? This isn't just about statistics or trends. It's about a shift in how people understand the world, a shift that's reshaping culture, ethics, and identity. And the reasons aren't shallow. They go deep into psychology, history, and logic. Let's start with something simple. Intelligent people are often trained to question. They're used to examining claims, testing evidence, and revising their beliefs when new information appears. That mindset doesn't stop when they leave the lab or the office. It seeps into every part of life, including faith. And here's where the tension begins. Religion demands certainty, often without proof, while intellectual honesty requires doubt when evidence is missing. For someone who values truth over comfort, this creates an internal collision. It's not about arrogance or rebellion, it's about integrity. You can't dedicate your life to evidence-based thinking and then suspend that standard for your most important beliefs without feeling the fraction. Another reason is the sheer accessibility of knowledge. In the past, a person's view of the world was limited to their community. If everyone around you believed the same story, it felt universal. Today, that illusion is gone. A few clicks can show you thousands of belief systems, each claiming absolute truth, each with sacred texts, miracles, and moral codes. When you see that diversity laid out side by side, something changes. You realize these can't all be right. And that simple realization plants a seed of doubt. For many intelligent people, that seed grows into a question. If my religion feels true because I was born into it, would I believe it if I were born somewhere else? That question doesn't go away because once you recognize the power of cultural conditioning, you can't unsee it. There's also the problem of contradictions. Intelligent minds are sensitive to inconsistency, and organized religions are full of them. Texts that claim divine perfection often contain historical errors, moral rules that clash with modern ethics, and passages that contradict each other outright. Apologists work hard to explain these away, but the explanations often feel strained. And when someone is trained to detect weak arguments, those justifications ring hollow. Add to that the discoveries of science, cosmology showing a universe billions of years old, evolution explaining life without design, neuroscience mapping thoughts to brain activity, and the gap between faith claims and observable reality grows wider. For many, that gap becomes impossible to bridge. But here's something that doesn't get enough attention: morality. One of the most common assumptions is that people need religion to be good, yet research shows the opposite. Countries with high levels of non-belief often have lower crime rates, better education, and stronger social safety nets. Intelligent people see this data and start asking, if morality thrives without religion, why keep pretending it needs divine permission? The idea that goodness requires fear of punishment or hope of reward feels not only unnecessary but demeaning. It suggests that empathy and reason aren't enough. And for those who believe human dignity matters, that's a deal breaker. Another powerful factor is transparency. The digital age has cracked open the doors that institutions once kept locked. Scandals that would have been hidden a century ago are now headlines. Abuse cover-ups, financial corruption, political manipulation. These aren't outliers, they're patterns. And intelligent people notice patterns. They start to wonder, if this system is truly guided by the highest moral force, why does it behave like any other power structure, protecting itself at the expense of truth? That question is corrosive, because it shifts faith from sacred ground to human ground. Once you see that the machinery of religion runs on the same fuel as politics, money, influence, control, it's hard to believe it's divine. And then there's the psychological angle. Many leave because they realize their beliefs weren't chosen, they were inherited. That's a profound moment. You look back and realize that the stories you once called eternal truth entered your mind when you were too young to question them. You didn't weigh options. You absorbed what your parents, teachers, and community told you. And for intelligent people, recognizing that fact feels like waking from a dream. Once you ask, would I believe this if I'd been born elsewhere? The ground starts to shake. For many, that question alone is the beginning of the end. This isn't just theory. We see it everywhere. Look at the demographics. In highly educated nations, religiosity is in free fall. Surveys in Europe, North America, and parts of Asia show record numbers identifying as nones, people with no religious affiliation. And it's not because life is easy or people are arrogant. It's because the old answers don't fit the questions anymore. People want frameworks that respect evidence, that allow growth, that don't demand mental gymnastics to reconcile ancient texts with modern knowledge. But here's something rarely said. Leaving religion isn't just an intellectual shift. It's an emotional earthquake. For many, faith was tied to family, tradition, even identity. Walking away can feel like betrayal, exile, loss. Intelligent people know this. They anticipate the cost, and that makes their decision even more telling. They choose honesty over comfort, clarity over belonging. That's not rebellion. That's courage, and courage is contagious. Every person who takes that step makes it easier for someone else to question, to wonder, to think freely without fear. The real story here isn't just about leaving something behind. It's about what people are moving toward. They're building communities based on reason, compassion, and shared humanity instead of dogma. They're creating meaning through curiosity, art, science, and relationships. They're proving that life without rigid faith isn't empty, it's expansive. That scares institutions that thrived on fear. But for individuals, it's liberation, not from morality, not from purpose, but from chains disguised as anchors. And that brings us to the heart of this shift. It's not a war between faith and intelligence. It's a conversation about what it means to live authentically in a world where answers aren't handed down but discovered. Intelligent people aren't leaving because they hate belief. They're leaving because they love truth more than certainty. And truth, as every thinker knows, is never afraid of a question. One of the strongest forces keeping people inside religion isn't theology, it's culture. Cultural conditioning begins before we can even form memories. It's the songs sung to children at bedtime, the prayers whispered before meals, the holidays that structure the year. These experiences feel like family, warmth, belonging. That's why questioning religion can feel like questioning love itself. For intelligent people, this creates a unique struggle. They notice inconsistencies, they see the gaps in logic, but those doubts collide with powerful emotional associations. It's not just, what if this belief is wrong? It's, if this belief is wrong, what happens to my identity, my relationships, my sense of home? This is cognitive dissonance at its most intense. Cognitive dissonance is the psychological discomfort we feel when holding two opposing ideas. In this case, I want to believe what's true versus I belong to a system that defines truth for me. Intelligent people often experience this dissonance more sharply because they're skilled at detecting contradictions. And here's the irony: the smarter you are, the better you become at rationalizing. Studies show that highly intelligent believers often create elaborate justifications to preserve faith. They can explain away contradictions, reinterpret troubling passages, and build philosophical scaffolding to hold the structure together. But this is exhausting. Over time, maintaining a fragile belief system against mounting evidence feels like patching a sinking ship. Eventually, the mental strain outweighs the comfort of belonging, and that's when people walk away, not because they stopped caring, but because they care too much about intellectual honesty to keep pretending. History is full of examples. Think of philosophers like Bertrand Russell, who wrote Why I Am Not a Christian, not as an act of rebellion, but as a response to evidence and logic. Or Charles Darwin, raised in a religious culture who struggled privately with the implications of his own discoveries. Darwin wasn't eager to abandon faith. He delayed publishing for decades because he understood the cultural shock it would cause. His story reveals something crucial. Leaving religion often isn't about anger or pride. It's about integrity colliding with reality. When the data points one way and tradition points another, truth wins for those who value it above comfort. In the modern era, the same pattern repeats. Look at scientists like Carl Sagan, Neil deGrasse Tyson, or Nobel laureates who quietly drifted from faith as their careers advanced. Not because they wanted to reject meaning, but because their work demanded intellectual consistency. When you spend your life applying rigorous standards of evidence, it becomes harder to make exceptions for supernatural claims. That's not arrogance, that's alignment. They want one standard for truth, not two. The internet accelerates this shift. Before, intelligent people wrestling with doubt might feel utterly alone. In some societies, questioning faith could mean losing everything: family, community, even safety. Today, online spaces connect doubters instantly. They share experiences, compare notes, and discover they're not broken or immoral. They're thinking. This realization is liberating. It dismantles one of religion's strongest tools, fear of isolation. When that fear fades, the psychological cage unlocks, and what follows is a wave of departures that no amount of preaching can stop. But what about meaning? This is the question many fear. If religion goes, what replaces it? Intelligent people wrestle with this too. They've been told that without faith, life is empty, morality collapses, despair wins. Yet when they step outside, they discover something surprising. Meaning doesn't vanish, it expands. Purpose can come from curiosity, creativity, relationships, and the pursuit of truth itself. Morality can emerge from empathy and reason, rather than commands from authority. For many, this realization is the final break. Once you see that goodness doesn't need a supernatural enforcer, the rationale for staying in a system built on fear dissolves. And so, the quiet exodus grows. It's not loud because these shifts rarely make headlines, but look at the data. In 1970, the percentage of people identifying as religiously unaffiliated in the US was barely 5%. Today, it's over 30%, and among young adults it's higher still. In Western Europe, traditional faith is collapsing even faster, and the pattern correlates strongly with education. The more access to knowledge, the weaker religion's grip becomes. Not because education teaches atheism, but because it teaches tools, critical thinking, skepticism, and evidence-based reasoning that make blind faith harder to sustain. What does this mean for the future? That's what we'll explore in the next section, how this trend reshapes politics, ethics, and culture, and why intelligent people leaving religion may be the biggest cultural transformation of our time.